First, I would like to mention that before the birth of Christ, the Hebrew Bible was already in existence. There were 39 books written by prophets and leaders inspired by God. When Jesus was tempted, he quoted Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 3. He said, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out from the mouth of God." Also, when Jesus started his ministry at the age of 30, he went to the synagogue. The book of Isaiah was given to him. Jesus opened the book of Isaiah, went straight to Isaiah chapter 61 verse 1. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to preach the gospel, to heal the brokenhearted, and to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." And then he closed the book. So we can see that Jesus studied the scriptures. Now, moving on to the New Testament. How were the books of the New Testament compiled? The first century after his death and resurrection, people wrote about him, especially his disciples. Remember, in John chapter 21 verse 25, it is written that if we are to write everything that Jesus did in a book, the whole earth cannot contain the book. Just in 3 years, they can't write everything he did, because he started his ministry at 30 and ended when he was 33 years. So this means that every second he was awake, every minute of his life was a testimony. So not only did the disciples write about Jesus' deeds, some leaders of the church, like Paul and Peter, they wrote letters to members of the church encouraging them in God. Before the end of the first 100 years after the resurrection of Christ, which is the first century, a lot of books had been written. Believers began to ask, which of this book should we take? Which one should we leave? So this became a challenge for the church at the time. Through the leadership of the Catholic Church, the books of the New Testament were selected. So they had guidelines on how to select the books that should be added to the existing Hebrew Bible. One of the guidelines for this selection was that the writer must have been a disciple of Jesus Christ himself, or the writer must have interviewed witnesses who saw Jesus. That was one of the criterias. The second criteria was that the book must have been written in the first 100 years after the resurrection of Christ. And the third was that the book must not contradict the existing 39 Hebrew books of the Bible. The Council of Nicea was formed. Also, there was another council called the Council of Constantinople. So at the end of this process, 27 books were selected and added to the Hebrew Bible. Saint Jerome was the first who published and compiled the Old and the New Testament together, but he did so in Latin, which is called the Vulgate. Although there were other spiritual books that were written after the Old Testament and before the New Testament, but guess what? They didn't make it into the Bible as we have today. One of the reasons they were not considered as being inspired by God, it's because Jesus never quoted from any of those books. And the writings of the disciples of Jesus didn't quote any of those books. After Saint Jerome published the Latin Bible, which was the first compilation like we have today, Williams Tyndale was the first to translate the Greek and the Hebrew Bible to English. Note that the Hebrew Bible was originally written in Hebrew, which is the Old Testament, while the New Testament books were written in Greek. Douay-Rheims in 1522, between 1522 to 1535, published another English Bible, but this time around, he translated it from the version of Jeremy. However, King James I commissioned the revision of the English Bible written by Williams Tyndale. So the English Bible was revised one more time, comparing it to the original Hebrew and Greek language. Over 80% of what Williams wrote was adopted by the King James Version. However, today, do you know we have over 900 English versions of the Bible? Some of the Bible, like New American Standard Bible, King James Bible, they focus on interpreting the Hebrew and the Greek Bible word to word in English. But some of these versions, their focus is different. For example, the New Living Translation, the NLT, and the Contemporary English Version, CEV, their focus is to translate the Hebrew and the Greek books for you to be able to read it and understand it. So for them to do that, they had to paraphrase the words. We also have these different sets of versions of the Bible. For example, the Message. Have you heard about the Message Bible? Or you must have heard about the Living Bible, TLB. These ones, they are creative. They interpret the Bible from Hebrew and Greek in thought for thought. But some versions of the Bible have been re-edited from what we know. Because once they send an update, oh, you need to update your app, and you update your app, all these changes are done without your knowledge. Amen.